Anthropic accidentally shipped part of its own coding brain onto the internet. And the weird part is that the most important thing they may have leaked was not secret AI magic. It was the product machinery wrapped around the AI. That's what makes this story good. Because if this were just, oops, some code leaked, then fine. Embarrassing, annoying, next story. But that's not what this is. This is a frontier AI lab, one that sells itself as thoughtful, cautious, safety-minded, adult in the room, accidentally exposing a huge chunk of the software shell around one of its flagship products. Not the model weights, not Claude's soul, not the encrypted Ark of the Covenant. The shell, the orchestration, the product plumbing, the messy, practical layer that turns a powerful model into something real people can actually use. And that matters more than a lot of people want to admit. Because the AI industry spent the last 2 years acting like the whole war is about model IQ. Who has the smartest model? Who has the biggest context? Who wins the benchmark blood sport? Meanwhile, the actual products people are paying for increasingly live one layer higher. The tool wrapper, the workflow, the memory tricks, the orchestration, the permission structure, the way the model actually gets turned into useful software. That is where Claude Code lives, and that is why this leak matters. Not because Anthropic accidentally let the public look behind the curtain, because the curtain might be more strategically important than the stage. Chapter 1. The leak wasn't the model. So let's clean up the frame. Claude Code is Anthropic's agentic coding system. Their own product page says it reads your codebase, makes changes across files, runs tests, and delivers committed code. That is not autocomplete with better branding. That is the kind of tool that tries to behave more like a junior engineer than a fancy tab key. And according to Axios, what leaked was not some tiny snippet. It was a debugging artifact bundled into a routine release that pointed to a cloud archive containing nearly 2,000 files and about 500,000 lines of code. That is not a paper cut. That is a blueprint leak. Anthropic told Axios and others that no customer data or credentials were exposed, and that this was a release packaging issue caused by human error, not a traditional security breach. That distinction matters. This was not some hoodie-wearing supervillain breaking in through a skylight. This was release hygiene, operational discipline, the boring adult stuff. And that's exactly why I care. Because if AI is becoming infrastructure, then boring adult stuff is the story. Not just model alignment, not just evals, not just constitutional AI and pretty safety language. The pipelines, the packaging, the internal controls, the release process, the "how did this file get into production" question that ruins cocktail party mystique, but decides whether a company is actually grown up. That is the tension here. Anthropic didn't leak Claude's underlying model internals. It leaked the product shell around Claude Code. And in the agent era, that shell may be the part that matters most to competitors. Because if the model is one engine in a race car, the product shell is the steering, tires, telemetry, and suspension. You can't win with just the engine. And you definitely can't pretend the rest of the car is not strategic. Chapter 2. Why the product shell matters. Now here's where the story gets spicy. The leak was not just about current code. It was about roadmap. Axios says the exposed material included unreleased features and internal performance data. The Verge says people digging through it found hints of a Tamagotchi-style coding pet, an always-on background agent called Kairos, and clues about Claude Code's memory architecture. That is the part I think people should take seriously. Because current code is one thing, roadmap code is another. Current code tells competitors how you built something. Roadmap code tells them where you're going. That is a free engineering education. And in AI, that matters because the moat is getting weird. If you had asked people a year ago where the moat lived, most would have pointed straight at the model, the weights, the raw capability, the frontier benchmark flexing. But agentic products muddy that, because once multiple labs have very strong models, the fight shifts upward. How does the tool actually work? How does memory get handled? How do permissions work? How do long tasks get managed? How do you keep the thing useful without making it insane? How do you make it feel reliable instead of impressive? That layer is product strategy. It is not just frosting. So when Anthropic leaks that layer, even without leaking the core model, it still stings. And the internet lesson here is brutal. Once it's out, it's out. The Verge says copies spread fast, and a GitHub repository tied to the code amassed more than 50,000 forks. That's the part companies still seem emotionally unprepared for. Takedowns are real. So is the Streisand effect. So is the fact that the internet treats "please don't share this" like an appetizer. Once mirrored, dissected, translated, and reposted, you are no longer containing a leak. You are negotiating with weather. And that's why the roadmap angle matters more than the raw embarrassment. Embarrassment fades. Competitors learning from your product shell can last much longer. Chapter 3: Safety Branding Meets Adult Operations. Now we get to the irony that makes this hit harder. Anthropic is the company that gets discussed as the safety-first lab. That branding is a big part of its identity, and that means this leak lands awkwardly. Not because the code leak proves the models are unsafe. That would be lazy. It lands awkwardly because it reminds everyone that safety is not just an alignment story. Safety is also operational maturity. Axios quotes Anthropic calling this a human error packaging issue. The Verge quotes Gartner's Arun Chandrasekaran saying the incident should be a call for Anthropic to invest more in processes and tools for better operational maturity. That is the sentence I want tattooed on the entire industry. Operational maturity. Because if frontier AI is becoming critical software, then process failures are product failures. Release engineering is part of safety. Dependency hygiene is part of safety. Access control is part of safety. Packaging discipline is part of safety. You do not get to talk like a civilization-scale infrastructure company and then act surprised when people judge your release pipeline like one. And Axios says this was the second Claude Code source leak in just over a year. That does not automatically make it catastrophic, but it does make it harder to write off as a one-time cosmic prank. This is where the adult skepticism comes in. Best case, this was humiliating but manageable. No customer data leaked, no credentials leaked, no core model internals exposed. The company fixes the pipeline, keeps shipping, and rivals learn less than Twitter thinks they learned. That is possible. Most likely, this is a reputational bruise and a strategic bruise. Not fatal, not trivial. A reminder that the product shell now matters enough that leaking it is a real wound. Worst case, it becomes symbolic of a deeper problem. Frontier labs talking beautifully about safety while fumbling the unglamorous operational controls that real infrastructure depends on. That is the nightmare version. Not because one debug artifact ends civilization, because it reveals that some of the companies building the future may still be weirdly adolescent in the places that matter most. Chapter 4. What this actually changes. So what actually changes after this? First, I think people should stop pretending the only valuable thing in AI is the model itself. This leak is a reminder that the software stack around the model is now strategically important enough to hurt when it escapes. Second, I think labs are going to get judged much harder on release discipline. Not just, is the model aligned, but can your company securely ship the thing you built without accidentally mailing your own blueprint to the internet? That is a very different standard. And honestly, it's overdue. Third, I think this sharpens the real moat question. In the agent era, is the moat the model? Sometimes, but increasingly it may be the full stack. The orchestration, the product workflow, the interface between reasoning and action, the way the tool actually behaves in a messy real-world environment. That's why this leak matters. Not because Anthropic leaked Claude's soul. It leaked a meaningful chunk of the machinery that makes Claude Code Claude Code. And that is enough to make the whole industry pay attention. 3 takeaways. First, this was not a classic breach. It was a self-inflicted packaging failure. Second, the strategic sting is not just the code. It's the roadmap, the implementation detail, and the free insight competitors now get. Third, in the AI agent era, release engineering is part of AI safety. That's the real lesson. Not, haha, they shipped the wrong file. Though, to be clear, that is objectively funny. The real lesson is that once AI becomes infrastructure, the boring adult operational stuff stops being secondary. It becomes the test. And this week, Anthropic did not fail the model test. It failed the packaging test, which, in 2026, may matter more than people are comfortable admitting. Signal over hype. Subscribe to join the expedition.